An unlikely intersection there in Beaufort, South Carolina, was thick enough to taste a humid cocktail of sweet tea, honeysuckle, and history so heavy it felt like a wool blanket in July. For Jeremiah Yem Vance, it was the taste of suffocation. He sat on the weathered planks of his mother's porch, a top-of-the-line drafting pencil feeling alien in his hand as he sketched not the drooping Spanish moss or the proud, problematic columns of the nearby plantations, but the clean, impossible lines of a cantilevered glass house suspended over a chasm. It was a building from another world, a world he desperately wanted to build for himself. Yem was a paradox in Beaufort. He was a son of the soil, respected for his quiet demeanor and the strength in his shoulders, but his mind lived in the clouds, in blueprints and architectural theory. He carried the legacy of his ancestors, who had worked the very land he now longed to escape, and the hopes of his mother, who saw his talent as a ticket to a life less burdened than her own. But every yes, mum, and every nod to the town elders felt like a brick being laid in a wall around him. A few hours away, in the manicured historic district of Charleston, Eleanor Ellie Prescott felt a different kind of suffocation, one scented with expensive perfume and old money. She was on a required trip for her art history course at Duke, but the lesson of the day was not in the architecture, but in the social maneuvering of her classmates. They fluttered from one antique shop to another, their conversation a vapid stream of gossip about who was summering where and whose father had just acquired a new yacht. Her friend, Brittany Hayes, was holding court, her laughter as sharp and brittle as the champagne glass she'd be holding at the club later. Ellie felt like a ghost, drifting through a life that was supposed to be hers, but fit like a suit to sizes too small. Seeking refuge, she slipped away from the group and found herself drawn to a modest, unassuming building with a simple sign, Preservation Society Exhibit, the hidden frameworks of Charleston. Inside, the air was still and reverent, the noisy Charleston streets faded into a respectful silence. The exhibit was small, focused on the unseen structural genius of the city's oldest buildings, and it was there, in front of a fascinating cross-section demonstrating Gullah Geechee building techniques using palmetto logs and tabby concrete, that she heard a low, appreciative hum. She turned. He was tall and lean, his focus so intense. He seemed to be absorbing the blueprints through sheer force of will. He was tracing the lines of the drawing in the air with a long, elegant finger, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he finally looked up, his dark eyes met hers, and the world tilted slightly on its axis. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Yem said, his voice a low baritone, smoother than the aged wood around them. They built foundations to last centuries with nothing but mud, oyster shells, and an innate understanding of physics. It's pure genius. Ellie, usually so articulate, found herself momentarily lost for words. "It's honest," she finally managed, the word feeling more right than any academic term she could have chosen. "It's real." His face broke into a smile that seemed to light the entire dusty room. "Honest, that's the perfect word." His name was Yem, her name was Ellie. They talked for what felt like 10 minutes, but was nearly 2 hours. Their conversation, weaving from architectural integrity to the stories whispered by old houses, to the shared feeling of being slightly out of sync with their own lives. He spoke of his dream to design buildings that were both innovative and soulful. She spoke of her passion for art that told the truth, not just what was pretty. For the first time, Ellie felt seen not as a Prescott, an heiress or a socialite, but as herself. And as Yem looked at her, he saw not a fragile white girl from a world he couldn't touch, but a mind that burned as brightly as his own. The exhibit was closing. They stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the spell of the quiet room still clinging. To them, the thought of her rejoining her friends and him driving back to his stifling town felt like a physical pain. "I don't normally do this," Yem said, a hint of nervousness in his otherwise steady voice. "Me neither," Ellie replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. He pulled out his phone, and as she entered her number, their fingers brushed. It was a spark, a tiny, electric current that promised warmth and light, but also carried the unmistakable, terrifying potential to start a fire. As they said goodbye, a shared, unspoken thought hung in the humid air between them, a hope as exhilarating as it was dangerous, for they both knew they stood on opposite sides of a chasm far wider than the one in Yem's drawings. The secret garden. Their first date was a masterclass in neutrality. They met in Colombia, a city that belonged to neither of them, at a museum where they could be two anonymous art lovers. The dates that followed became their lifeline, a string of clandestine meetings in parks, quiet diners, and forgotten back roads halfway between Beaufort and Charlotte. This secret, shared world became their garden, a place where the labels of their everyday lives couldn't take root. In their garden, he wasn't a poor black man from the country, and she wasn't a wealthy white girl from the suburbs. They were just Yem and Ellie, and in each other's presence, they could finally breathe. Yem fell in love with the way Ellie's mind worked, the way she could find a universe of meaning in a single brushstroke. She fell in love with the quiet strength that radiated from him, the way he saw the world not just for what it was, but for what it could be. They were building something, a structure of trust and intimacy, more real and more precious than any building Yem had ever designed. One Sunday afternoon, after a perfect date, Yem sat at the kitchen table while his mother, Martha, shelled peas. The rhythmic snap of the pods was the only sound. He knew he couldn't keep his joy a secret any longer, not from her. "Mama," he began, his voice soft. "I've met someone." Martha's hands stilled. She looked at her son, her eyes holding the deep, cautious wisdom of a lifetime spent navigating a hostile world. Oh, he told her everything. He told her about Ellie's kindness, her brilliant mind, her laugh that made him feel like he could do anything. When he finally finished, he looked at his mother, bracing himself. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and reached across the table to take his. Her hand was warm, but her grip was tight with worrying. "Jeremiah," she said, her voice heavy with love and a sorrow he was only beginning to understand. "That world out there, son. It smiles to your face and holds a knife behind its back." She paused, her gaze distant. "Years ago, your father and I tried to get a loan for this house. The banker, a white man, was all smiles. Called me Martha, called your daddy by his first name, shook our hands. The denial letter came a week later, no reason given. That's the kind of politeness her world is built on." Her eyes refocused on him, pleading, "I just don't want to see that smile turn on you. I don't want to see your heart get broken by a world that isn't ready for a man as good as you." Yem's heart ached for her, for the pain she was trying to shield him from. "She's not like that, Mama. I hope not, baby," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I truly hope not. Just be careful." She saw the unshakable love in his eyes and knew it was too late for caution. Her support was a given, but it would forever be laced with fear. Meanwhile, Ellie made her own clumsy attempt to test the waters. Lounging by the pool at the country club, she casually mentioned to Brittany Hayes that she was seeing someone. "Oh, thank God," Brittany said, lowering her oversized sunglasses. "I was worried you were going to become a hermit. Is he cute?" "Who? Is he from the Barkley family? I heard James Barkley is back from London." "No, he's not from around here," Ellie said, choosing her words carefully. Brittany's perfectly tweezed eyebrows rose. "Not from around here. Don't tell me he's one of those artsy types from Noda. Dad says that whole neighborhood is going to the dogs." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Just make sure his last name is on the club registry, Ellie. It just saves so much trouble later on." The comment, so casual and so venomous, made Ellie's stomach turn. She saw her world for what it was, a beautifully decorated cage, and Brittany was one of its chief wardens. The first tremor that truly shook their secret garden came a few weeks later. They were having a picnic in a state park, a beautiful, secluded spot Yem had found. They were lying on a blanket, Ellie reading poetry aloud, Yem with his head in her lap, when the sound of approaching voices startled them. It was Arthur Prescott's business partner and his wife, A couple Ellie had known her entire life. Panic seized her. In a frantic, clumsy scramble, they gathered their things. "This way," Yem whispered, his voice calm but firm, pulling her behind a thicket of rhododendrons. They crouched in the dirt, hearts pounding as the couple passed by, their cheerful, oblivious chatter echoing through the woods. They were so close Ellie could smell the woman's cloying perfume. When they were gone, Ellie and Yem stood up. Their clothes smudged with dirt, the idyllic afternoon shattered. Ellie was trembling, not from fear, but from a profound sense of shame. They had been hiding, like they were doing something wrong. Yem wrapped his arms around her, but the embrace felt different. The outside world had finally found its way into their garden, and they both knew, with a sinking certainty, that the walls they had built were not nearly high enough. "The lion's den, I can't do this anymore," Ellie said, her voice trembling but resolute. They were sitting in Yem's truck after the incident in the park, the silence thick with unspoken fears. "I can't keep hiding us, it's not fair. To you, it's not fair to what we have. I want you to come to dinner on Sunday, I want you to meet my parents." Yem looked at her, his expression a mixture of love and deep apprehension. He knew this was a precipice. He had been a guest in the back doors of white folks' homes his entire life, his father a handyman, his mother a housekeeper to enter through. The front door as a daughter's partner was an entirely different kind of journey, one fraught with perils he understood far better than she could. But looking at the fierce determination in her eyes, he knew there was no other path forward. "Okay, Ellie," he said, taking her hand. "Okay, Sunday it is." The Prescott estate was less a house and more a monument to wealth and power. Perfectly manicured lawns rolled up to a brick behemoth with white columns that seemed to sneer down at the world. As Yem parked his modest Ford truck behind a gleaming black Mercedes, he felt the oppressive weight of the place settle on him. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress designed to keep people like him out. Ellie, sensing his unease, squeezed his hand. "Just be yourself, Yem, they'll love you." Her optimism felt painfully naive the moment Arthur Prescott opened the door. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with pale, cold eyes that performed a swift, dismissive appraisal of Yem from head to toe. There was no handshake. "Eleanor," he said, his voice clipped, "you're late." He glanced at Yem. "And you must be the young man she's been so secretive about." The dinner was an exercise in sustained psychological warfare. Ellie's mother was a nervous, fluttering presence, trying to fill the deadening silences with chatter about the weather. But Arthur dominated the room, his authority absolute. He directed all his attention to Yem, and his questions were precision-tooled weapons. "Vance," he began, mispronouncing it as Vance, unusual name. "Any relation to the Vances in Charleston, the shipping family?" "No, sir," Yem replied, his voice even. "My family is from Beaufort." Beaufort," Arthur said, taking a slow sip of wine. He made it sound like a disease. "And what does your father do in Beaufort, Mr. Vance?" "He passed away some years ago, sir. He was a carpenter," Arthur repeated, letting the word hang in the air, laden with his unspoken judgment. "And your mother, she's a caregiver at the local nursing home." "How noble," Arthur said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He turned his attention to Yem's ambitions. "Eleanor tells me you want to be an architect. A competitive field, one needs the right connections. The right background. What are your real intentions with my daughter, Mr. Vance?" The question was a direct hit. The subtext was screamingly clear. What does a poor black boy from nowhere want with a Prescott? Ellie slammed her fork down. "Dad, that is an insulting question. Yem is here as my guest, as my partner, and I expect you to treat him with respect." Arthur's cold gaze shifted to his daughter. "Respect, Eleanor, is earned. I am merely trying to understand what a man with no prospects, no family of note, and no resources could possibly offer a young woman who has been given everything." Yem felt a hot surge of anger, but he channeled it into a steely calm. He looked directly at Arthur, his voice quiet but unwavering. "Sir, with all due respect, what I have to offer your daughter isn't something that can be valued on a balance sheet. I love her and I respect her, which seems to be more than she's getting in this house." The silence that followed was absolute. Ellie's mother gasped. Arthur Prescott's face became a mask of cold fury. He slowly placed his napkin on the table, his movements dangerously deliberate. "The evening is over," he said, his voice low and menacing. He stood up, towering over the table. He spoke only to Ellie. "You will end this absurdity immediately. You will call this young man and inform him that this was a mistake. If you do not, you will consider yourself cut off. No trust fund, no allowance, no access to this family's resources. This family will not be contaminated and disgraced by this." Folly. Tears streamed down Ellie's face, but her voice was strong. "It's not a folly, Dad. It's my life." She stood up, took Yem's hand, and without another word, they walked out of the lion's den, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind them like a guillotine. In the car, Ellie finally broke down, her sobs shaking her whole body. Yem pulled over to the side of the road and simply held her. The attack had been brutal, far worse than he had imagined. But as he held her, a fierce, protective resolve hardened within him. They had faced the dragon and they were still standing. The ultimatum had been delivered and the choice, though painful, was clear. Their secret garden was gone, burned to the ground. Now they would have to learn to fight in the open. The backlash. Arthur Prescott was a man who wielded his influence like a weapon, and he wasted no time in launching a full-scale assault. The day after the disastrous dinner, Ellie's credit cards were declined at a coffee shop. A humiliating call to the bank confirmed it. Her accounts were frozen. Her father had severed the financial cord with surgical precision, but his cruelty went deeper. Yem had been on cloud nine a week earlier, having been informed he was a finalist for a prestigious internship at Holt & Associates, Charlotte's top architectural firm. It was the launching pad he had dreamed of. The final interview was a formality, they'd said. 2 days after the dinner, he received a curt email. The position had been unexpectedly filled. There was no explanation. Yem knew with a sickening certainty that Arthur had made a call. The internship, his dream, hadn't been filled. It had been murdered. While Arthur waged a silent, corporate war, Brittany Hayes launched a public one she had been waiting for. The fallout, and when Ellie stopped answering her calls, she knew exactly what to do. She found the one candid photo she had secretly snapped of Ellie and Yem on campus weeks ago, a moment of pure joy, with Yem's arm around Ellie as they both laughed. Brittany posted it on Instagram. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive venom. "So sad to see my sweet friend Ellie Prescott throwing her life away. Some people will do anything to climb the social ladder. Hope she knows what she's getting into, praying for her. #lost, #bad decisions, #be careful girls." The post exploded. Within hours, it was the talk of their entire social circle. The comments were a cesspool of coded racism and classism. Her father must be livid. Guess she has a thing for the help. It was a digital stoning, and Ellie was at the center. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications of unfollows and hateful DMs. The friends she had grown up with, the girls she had shared secrets with, now treated her like a leper. She was ostracized, her social life dismantled in a single afternoon. The poison didn't stop at the Charlotte city limits. Gossip travels fast, especially when it's scandalous. It trickled back to Beaufort, where the story became twisted and exaggerated. Yem, the town's quiet, ambitious boy, was now a gold-digging predator who had bewitched a rich white girl. He saw it in the way people looked at him at the grocery store, the way conversations stopped when he walked past the barber shop. The whispers followed him everywhere, a constant, corrosive presence. The combined weight of the financial cutoff, the career sabotage, and the public humiliation was immense. It was a relentless siege, and cracks began to show in their foundation. One evening in their small temporary apartment in a town that now felt hostile. The pressure finally erupted. Maybe he was right, Yem said, his voice hollow as he stared at the rejection email from another firm, the fifth one that week. Maybe I am ruining your life, Ellie, look at you. You've lost everything because of me, your family, your friends. Your money ... Don't you dare say that, Ellie shot back, her voice raw with pain. She was folding laundry, one of the few domestic tasks she'd ever had to do, and she felt overwhelmed and useless. This isn't your fault. It's theirs, it's my father's, it's Brittany's. But I'm the reason they're doing it. Yem's voice rose, filled with a despair that terrified her. If I had never walked into that exhibit, you would still have your life. You'd be fine, fine. Do you think I was fine? She cried, tears of frustration streaming down her face. I was drowning, Yem, I was suffocating. And then I met you, and for the first time, I could breathe. Now, the world is trying to choke us, and you want to give up. You want to let them win. I don't want to see you suffer anymore. He yelled, the words torn from him. I can't stand it. And I can't stand you talking like you regret me. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and devastating. They stared at each other from across the small room, the space between them suddenly a vast, empty canyon. The world had not only surrounded them, but it had finally gotten inside. They were isolated, heartbroken, and for one terrifying moment, they felt utterly alone, not just in the world, but from each other. The silence that followed was the sound of their love at its breaking point. The stand silence in the apartment was deafening, a monument to their despair. Yem retreated to the tiny balcony, staring into the night, feeling the weight of generations of struggle on his shoulders. Defeated, he pulled out his phone and did the one thing he could think of. He called his mother. He didn't have to say much. She heard the brokenness in his voice. I'm coming, was all she said. The next afternoon, Martha Vance's old but immaculate Buick pulled up. She walked into the tense apartment, took one look at her son's hollow eyes and Ellie's tear-streaked face, and didn't say a word. She simply opened her arms, and Ellie, to her own surprise, collapsed into her embrace. Martha held her, stroking her hair, before turning to pull Yem into the circle. She held them both, two wounded souls in the fierce, unconditional shelter of her love. She sat them down on the lumpy sofa. There was no "I told you so," there was no lecture. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a faded, creased photograph of a young black couple standing proudly in front of a small, unfinished wooden house frame. It was her and Yem's father when we were trying to build our house. Martha began, her voice soft but strong. The bank denied us twice. The white foreman on a job your daddy was working told him he'd never amount to anything more than a hammer for hire. We had no money, no help. Every evening, after a full day's work, your father would come to this patch of land and build. And every evening, I'd bring him dinner and hold the lamp. People would drive by and holler things. Someone threw a bottle. One night, we wanted to give up 100 times. She looked from Yem to Ellie, her eyes shining with tears. But one night, your daddy turned to me and said, Martha, their hate is a cage they built for themselves. Don't you dare lock us in it with them. So we kept building. We built our home with our own two hands. She looked directly at Yem, then at Ellie. That is your legacy, son, and now it's yours too, child. Their hate is their prison, not yours. Don't you let them win. Your love is your freedom. Her words were not just a comfort. They were a call to arms. It was the moral clarity they had. Lost in the chaos, looking at each other, really looking at each other for the first time since their fight, Yem and Ellie saw not defeat, but a flicker of the fire they once had. Martha's story had given them a new blueprint. That night, they didn't sleep. They planned. The despair was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Yem, ignoring the rejections, sat down and began to build a stunning digital portfolio, a testament to his talent that no one could sabotage. He started researching firms in cities known for their progressive culture, and booming tech scenes places like Austin and Atlanta, far from the reach of Arthur Prescott. The next day, Ellie walked into a small independent art gallery downtown and asked for a job. She didn't mention her art history degree from Duke or her family name. She spoke of her passion and her willingness to learn, to sweep floors, to do whatever it took. The owner, a sharp-eyed older woman, saw the fire in her eyes and hired her. On the spot, it was for minimum wage, but it was hers. It was independence. A week later, they drove to the Prescott estate. They weren't there to plead or negotiate. They walked up the grand stone steps and were let in by a surprised housekeeper. Arthur was in his study. Ellie walked in. Yem is silent, powerful presence just behind her. She didn't raise her voice. She simply placed her old house key on the gleaming surface of his antique desk. This key opens doors to a house, Dad, not a home, she said, her voice clear and steady. I'm giving it back. I choose a home. I choose Yem. I choose a life built on love and respect, not on money and prejudice. She looked at him, not with anger, but with a sudden, piercing pity. I'm sorry for you. You're living in a cage of your own making, and I don't think you even know where the lock is. Before Arthur could stammer a response, they turned and walked away. Their final act was to close the chapter with Brittany. They saw her at a cafe, holding court with her new circle of friends. Ellie walked straight to her table. Brittany, she sighed, her voice calm and devoid of malice. I just wanted to thank you. You showed me exactly what a friendship should not be. You showed me how small and fearful your world is. She smiled, a genuine, sad smile. I hope one day you find something real. Our friendship is over. As they walked out of the cafe, leaving a stunned and silent audience behind, Yem took Ellie's hand. It wasn't the triumphant end of a battle. It was the quiet, dignified beginning of a new life, a life they would build together, from the ground up. A blueprint for a new life. 5 years can feel like a lifetime. The person who stood on a dusty porch in Beaufort sketching impossible dreams was a ghost to the man who now stood on the balcony of his Austin, Texas apartment, a city skyline sparkling before him. Jeremiah Vance was no longer an aspiring architect. He was a partner at Innovate Plus Build, a firm celebrated for its forward-thinking, sustainable designs. His work, which masterfully blended historical reverence with bold modernity, had won awards. He wasn't just building houses. He was building a reputation, one based on undeniable talent, not connections. The apartment wasn't sterile and cold like the Prescott mansion. It was a vibrant, living space that told their story. Bold canvases from underrepresented artists that Ellie had discovered hung on the walls. Books on art history and structural engineering filled the shelves, their spines mingling comfortably. The air smelled of fresh coffee and the faint, sweet scent of cinnamon. It was the scent of their home. Ellie had found her own calling. The small gallery job had ignited a passion, and she had poured her energy and sharp eye into creating her own space. The Prescott Gallery, she had defiantly kept the name, rebranding it as a symbol of her own making, was now one of Austin's most respected art spaces, a platform for diverse voices that the traditional art world often overlooked. A peal of laughter echoed from the living room. Yem smiled and walked back inside. There on the floor, Martha Vance was building a wobbly tower of colorful blocks with a tiny, giggling girl with Ellie's bright, curious eyes and Yem's warm, infectious smile. Her name was Hope. Martha looked up at Yem, her face a portrait of pure, unadulterated pride. The fear that had once tightened her features was gone, replaced by a deep and abiding joy. She had been their first and most steadfast believer, and this beautiful life was her dividend. As Yem knelt to join the game, the mail carrier buzzed. In the stack of letters was a thick, cream-colored envelope with familiar, elegant handwriting. It was from Ellie's mother. With a shared, knowing glance, Yem and Ellie opened it together. It was not a letter of defense or justification. It was a letter of profound and aching regret. Her mother wrote of the hollowness of her life in the years since Ellie had left, of Arthur's increasing isolation, a man trapped in a gilded cage of his own pride. She wrote of her shame in her own passivity. And she wrote, her words trembling on the page, of her deep, desperate desire to meet her granddaughter. She had enclosed a photo of a silver locket. Ellie's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow, they were tears of a complex, quiet catharsis. Some bridges, perhaps, could be rebuilt, but the foundation would have to be new, laid on terms of truth and acceptance. The victory wasn't in her family crawling back. It was in knowing that she and Yem no longer needed them to be whole. Later, that evening, as Hope slept soundly and the city lights twinkled below, Yem wrapped his arms around Ellie on the balcony. They stood in silence, to master builders who had faced down a world determined to tear them apart. Their journey had taught them a powerful lesson. Love, they realized, did not magically conquer prejudice. It did not erase hate from the hearts of men like Arthur or erase the casual cruelty of a world that judged by skin color. What love did was infinitely more powerful. It gave them the courage to build a new world for themselves, a fortress of mutual respect and unwavering support. It was their sanctuary, their testament, and their home. They had not won a battle against the odds. They had rendered the odds irrelevant by designing a life of their own, from a blueprint made of resilience, courage, and an unbreakable love. Thank you for watching this story on Stories That Resonate. If their journey moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that love is the most powerful force for change. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.